What's up, y'all? You know what time it is. It's about to be that time.
What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the latest episode of the Layup Line. The NBA season is really almost back. We've got preseason games going on already throughout this week. As of the recording of this video, a few games have already been played, so if you need a place to go to for consistent NBA coverage, consider subscribing to this channel and checking us out on all social media. Because we're so close to the start of the regular season, most teams' rosters are already set in stone, but I still wanted to take today to do a trade machine video to project out during these teams' seasons and decide where some adjustments could be made. Now, the first set of trades I have is between the Chicago Bulls and the Utah Jazz, where I have the Jazz swapping out Mike Conley for veteran point guard Tomas Satoransky and Otto Porter Jr. Now, this is the trade I think makes sense for both sides because it allows Mike Conley the option to play pick and pop with Lauri Markkanen and Wendell Carter the same way he used to play with Marc Gasol. He didn't really have that option playing with Rudy Gobert last season in Utah, so this allows him to get back to some of his strengths. This makes the Bulls a little weaker on wing depth, but it allowed them to empower Denzel Valentine to play some more, and Patrick Williams will be able to play in lineups with Lauri Markkanen and Wendell Carter Jr. Mike Conley will be an injury risk for the Bulls, but you can say the same thing about Otto Porter Jr. for them last season anyway, so I think it's a low-risk situation to make the swap. They do lose some wing depth and a reliable shooter in Otto Porter Jr., and there's potentials for issues over who will be the starting point guard for the team. Satoransky was very willing to come off the bench for Kobe White, so you gotta at least question Will Conley, or does it make more sense to still have Kobe coming off your bench as its sixth man? For Utah, the benefits are also clear. They're adding a 3-and-D wing who can play the 3 or the 4, and Conley wasn't always the best fit, so hopefully Tomas Satoransky becomes a better shooter than he was last season. Extra spacing around Gobert in the playoffs will allow for a decent rotation of shooters on the court for the Jazz at all times, and they're adding a less ball-dominant point guard in the backcourt with Mitchell, and Satoransky is still a good enough playmaker. He got 5.4 assists last season, so he can run the pick and roll with Gobert and let Mitchell get off ball as well. Now, there are some cons for Utah in this as well. Otto Porter Jr. would be a free agent, and he's likely going to be more expensive to re-sign than Mike Conley would have been. There's a little bit of a logjam on the wings with Bogdanovich, Ingles, Royce O'Neal, and now you'd be adding Otto Porter to the mix, and that could cause some issues in your locker room. There's a clear talent downgrade in going from Mike Conley to Tomas Satoransky, and Mike was a 37% three-point shooter last season, while Tomas Satoransky was only 32%. So there are some downsides, but I still think that this trade can benefit both sides. There's also the fact that the Jazz have a good enough head coach in Quinn Snyder to be able to make some benefits out of this as well. The next trade I have in mind is between the New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs. Now, this trade does involve some draft assets. Spurs will be getting a few picks in this. Now, we can probably go back and forth about what picks should be involved, but the base of the deal is pretty much just going to be DeMar DeRozan in a swap for Reggie Bullock, Julius Randle, and some picks. For the Knicks, they're adding a scorer in DeMar DeRozan, who's also a pretty good playmaker. He can play in pick and roll with Mitchell Robinson. This opens up some cap space for the team with DeRozan being on an expiring deal. He's a talented player in that New York market, and that could certainly bring some excitement having a former All-Star on the team, and they could even re-sign him if it makes sense at the end of the season. It gives them a solid NBA starter on the wing and a professional scorer that raises the ceiling of a team that was ranked 28th on offense last season. It opens up space in the front court for Obi Toppin to get minutes as a 4 without Julius Randle being there, and at worst, this is a neutral move on defense. As far as cons, this pushes Kevin Knox deeper onto the bench, which could stunt his development further. They lose a shooter in Reggie Bullock, and DeMar DeRozan's a reluctant and inefficient three-point shooter, so that could cause problems in lineups with Mitchell Robinson and RJ. They just have to keep in mind that they shouldn't overpay DeMar DeRozan to stay, especially if it doesn't look good during the season. There is some potential for Obi to just become a spot-up shooter, and that would hurt his development because he might be the team's best shooter at this point, and they shouldn't just be playing him as a spot-up option. He's going to want to get the ball a bit more, and Randle may not be a good defender, but giving Obi more minutes will still hurt you on defense. For the Spurs, they get to add a shooter in Reggie Bullock. It clears the wings for their young players to develop a bit more. Randall can probably play next to LaMarcus Aldridge, who had his second most efficient three-point shooting season on a career high volume. Can Randall get back to the player he was in New Orleans? He shot 34% from 3 on 3 threes a game there and had an efficient scoring season averaging 21 points. Hopefully San Antonio will be able to rein in some of Randall's poor shot decision, making him a more efficient player. There's a low risk because you're probably going to be losing DeMar anyway, and you probably weren't doing anything with the cap space that would have gotten you. It lowers your cost of salary for this season as well. But there are some cons for the move. The team recently re-signed Jakob Poeltl, who was a really good defender for them, and he probably won't be able to play with Julius Randle unless Julius becomes a better three-point shooter. Randle can also hold the ball for too long, and it clogs up the offense, so there's a risk that this does not change even in San Antonio. This does impact your cap space. DeMar was an expiring deal, and Randle's on a 2-year deal, even if this is less overall salary for this season. And while it opens up opportunities for Spurs guards and wings, there's still a logjam at the 4 and 5s with Rudy Gay, Julius Randle, LaMarcus Aldridge, Jakob Poeltl, and that's without even getting into the young guys that they brought in. They have Luka Simonik, Drew Eubanks, and Keita Bates-Diop as well. Both teams should probably wait it out and give it a decent sample to let their season play out and see how their year is going before pulling a trigger on a deal like this, but I still think it's something that can overall benefit both sides. The last trade I had in mind was a straight swap between the Brooklyn Nets and the Denver Nuggets for Paul Millsap and Taurean Prince. Now for the Nets, this gives them a veteran defender and floor spacer at the 4 in lineups with Kevin Durant and Jarrett Allen or DeAndre Jordan. There's some potential to use Paul Millsap as a stretch 5 as well, and Prince was pretty much an overpaid backup for Kevin Durant. Paul Millsap can potentially start or come off the bench at a lower price. They'd be re-signing Paul Millsap at a lower price next season as well. He's on an expiring deal if it doesn't work out, and Prince wasn't a great shooter last season, so he won't be playing on ball with Kyrie and Kevin Durant on the team. Cons for them is that Millsap does have a higher usage than Taurean Prince would have, so Millsap is another mouth to feed on a team already full of them. Millsap's an expiring deal, but that doesn't open up any money for the team if he leaves because they're already over the cap. Millsap is older, and there's the question of will he be regressing this season, so there's a risk for taking this move there. Now for Denver, they get the younger player in the deal and a better version of what Torrey Craig already was for them, with some slight Jeremy Grant vibes as well. Prince can be used as a cutter around great passers like Jokic and Murray. Millsap could be regressing anyway, so getting the younger player in Prince, he's got a good build as a good defender. Having Mike Malone as a coach will be an improvement for Taurean Prince from his last season, and Wes Unseld Jr. as a defensive assistant coach there could help Prince develop on defense as well. He can also play the 3 or the 4. Now there are some cons. He wasn't a great shooter last year, so you'll still have to make some offense-defense rotations like late in games. Millsap was also a vet in that locker room for 3 seasons, so now you risk throwing off some of your continuity and chemistry by trading him. Overall, I think this trade still benefits both sides, and there's a low risk to making it since I didn't include any draft picks for either side. Now those are my 3 trades. Let me know down below in the comments if you like them, or comment down below if you have any other trade ideas that you'd like to see featured in a trade machine. Thank you for watching this video. If you learned something new, or if you like what I do, don't forget to leave a like button on this video. Consider subscribing. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.